MasterClass is now worth over $2.5 billion, and you get to meet the VC that picked them when they had zero revenue.
We invested in 2014. This was 9 months before they even launched. There was a brand, but there was no revenue. They had filmed like one class at that point.
That's Alex, the managing director of Javelin Ventures, and he's about to take you inside the first meeting that he had with David, the CEO of MasterClass. Check it out.
He was explaining to me the idea, and I'm like, great idea, David, kind of hard to pull off. And he's like, he slips over a piece of paper.
What was on that paper changed everything for Alex about this business. Check out his response.
My mind was just blown. Like, how did you do that? He had a little bit of seed capital, but to be able to get that done was so hard, and that got the whole MasterClass flywheel going.
In this episode, you're going to get what was on that piece of paper so you can apply that to the next meeting you have with the VC. He also talks about the 4 points of defensibility that they look for when evaluating AI companies. He talks about valuation and a bunch of things that are going to help you go under the hood so that you can know how to get inside a mindset of a VC so you can close your round faster. I'm Adam O'Donnell. This is the Founder Initiative. Let's go.
There's actually a great opportunity still like in non-AI companies, but I think those founders, like I know you talked to Ajay from Rinse, for instance, right? That's a good example. They still need to have their eye on the ball in terms of what AI can do for them internally. Because what's going on, and this is part of this whole like, one person unicorn thing that Sam Altman coined. But I think it's directionally totally correct. I think one person's probably extreme, but directionally that's where it's going. It refers not to just like AI native companies. It refers to any kind of business, honestly, because now you can take these tools that were before just in the hands of scientists and researchers. And I'm talking about, these large language models, right? And they're completely democratized, right? For any creator, entrepreneur, founder to leverage in any facet of the business. So you're seeing all these tools come out that, are helping lower the cost of, development, marketing, go-to-market stack, all that stuff, right? So if you're a founder that's not building an AI, you need to pay attention to this stuff because the cost of doing business will go down dramatically, and you could leverage that in your business to lower your future cost of capital and just to have a more capital efficient business model, period. Like the best example is a company called Klarna. You've probably heard of it, right? Like they made a big deal about this, or in terms of, how do we leverage, they're not an AI company, but how do we leverage AI to essentially get to profitability and be the poster child of that. So you're going to see a lot more of that. I think maybe a lot of like those founders that are not native AI I don't know if they're thinking proactively enough about that because it's going to be dramatic. The folks that are building natively in AI, they've got kind of like two tailwinds in the sense that one, they're building a product that's so like in demand right now. Everybody wants it. And so, they're growing super fast because, again, it's like the topic of the moment. And they're also just, natively used to using these tools internally, right? So if you're building like a native tool for development, you're probably using something that someone else has built for marketing, right, as well. And they're kind of getting a double whammy in terms of leverage, right? So that's where you're seeing kind of this trend towards, the one person unicorn. Like I think I looked at the numbers, and like a unicorn pre this whole Gen AI wave, average headcount was 300 to 500 people. Now for the native AI companies that are reaching unicorn status, it's like 50 to 100. So it's a huge difference. Like, and it's only going to get, more efficient and more efficient, right? So I think like, just being cognizant of whatever business you're building of using these tools, not necessarily just in the product that you're building, but how do you use them, how you run your business on a day-to-day basis, maybe something that's a bit overlooked by founders who are not, native AI companies, if that makes sense.
The biggest question I have for you, because you've invested in some of the like incredible companies, MasterClass, and you're on the board like Thumbtack and Pair Eyewear, so many other ones.
Yeah.
If you had to just distill it, all your years of experience, if you had like the single biggest thing that you look for?
A bunch of factors, but the main one, it's not like, do you have all the right answers? Is do you have a process to getting the right answers over time, right? I know you talk a lot about product market fit on your podcast here, and that's really what it's about. Like nobody at our stage, we invested seed and like early Series A. We don't expect you to have, product market fit. We want to see signs of it or signals of it. And one of the biggest signals is, do you have an internal like religion and philosophy at your company of how to rapidly test and iterate on different hypotheses and be super data driven about that, right? So it could be like, you're doing a ton of qualitative research. It could be quantitative research via, a lot of data, and you've invested in a lot of dashboards. Like when we invested in Thumbtack, that was the thing that blew us away. They were a seed stage company, and we kept growing them with all these like data related questions. Like, we don't know, but here's the dashboard that we built in house, and let us look it up. Boom, there's the answer. We're like, what? You're really taking this seriously, because again, it's not going to be like one big, optimization that's going to get them to huge scale. It's going to be a bunch of little ones. And so you need to have that culture almost in your company to get to that right answer by testing and iterating. So we look for signs of that. Do they have the process to rapidly test and figure things out quickly? That's the number one thing that we look for.
It's understanding the process that they're doing, and you're like, if you had to phrase like another example of a founder like surfacing that, how would you describe it? Is it just like, hey, here's our testing process, and like leading with that?
Yeah, it's actually around intellectual honesty. Like when we ask them a question, it's not like, here's the answer, I'm so certain of it. And we're like, look, we don't necessarily know, but here's how we're gonna test, right? This is the process we're gonna go through to figure it out. Here's what we don't know yet, and here's how we're gonna go figure it out. And through those type of questions, you see whether they have that process internally or not.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So let's talk about yellow flags in the due diligence, or just those early conversations.
Are they too sure of the answers early on, right? Because we know that things change dramatically. So being able to show that adaptability and intellectual rigor, and also, frankly, it's a window to how the partnership is going to look down the road. Like, are they going to be willing to take feedback, to have conversations with us, and just kind of have that open mindset. So that's critical. Sometimes you see founders that are not open to that, and that's fine. Maybe they're a second time, third time founder. For our type of firm, we prefer to have that kind of working collaboration. So we will kind of screen for that. I think around defensibility is one of the biggest things that we look for, especially right now in this AI world. Is this something that's truly defensible, or can it be replicated by one of the large LLM players down the road? Like that is critical. You need that defensibility. We look at that, and then I think for us, like the number one criteria, and I don't know if it's a yellow flag necessarily, but what we look for is really some sort of leverage that's built into their distribution strategy or business model that allows them to scale to significant levels of revenue, quickly without a lot of capital. And I think that's, kind of earlier to what we were talking about before, plays into the themes of like capital efficient growth and being able to leverage all these new tools that are coming out to be as efficient as you can, because that's less dilutive to them, to us as investors. It's a really important quality. And if they don't understand how distribution is going to work, that's a big yellow flag for us, maybe even a red flag. Honestly, distribution is paramount in early stage venture. So yeah.
What's the biggest thing that's shifted with distribution? Because that keeps coming up with other VCs I've been interviewing, like Eric from Hustle Fund, and just there's something about like the go-to-market strategy that's always been important, of course, but it's like it seems like it's more now important than ever, because so much is possible for building.
Yeah, there's also a lot of noise too. Like there's tons of competitors out there, right? And so, and again, the fact that it's now easier than ever to start a company, the barriers to entry are much lower. So you are going to have a lot of competition, right? So that's one of the ways to potentially stand out is, and it's not any one thing. It's, potentially you're, really good at thought leadership and content marketing, right? Some people just have that gene, that DNA to be able to do that. Ideally, it's, endemic to the product itself, right? And what you've built and what people are willing to pay for it. And so the unit economics are super compelling, that whether it's a B2B company where you can afford to have, top of the line account executives, or it's a consumer company where you can afford to do paid marketing, but it is a super high level of LTV to CAC and great payback period, that it's just obvious. Like, I look back at the companies that have done really, well for us, and it was pretty obvious they had a good distribution, right? Because the metrics kind of spoke that, right? It was like 4-to-1, 5-to-1 LTV to CAC type numbers, and even my misses, I look back on and I look at my notes, I'm like, wow, that was kind of there to begin with. I should have just, looked at that, and it would have been pretty obvious. So anyway, so that's yeah. So I mean, those are the things that we kind of look for on the distribution side. I think all early stage startups, they need to figure out what I like to call the scrappy spark, which is, you're almost kind of hacking your way to get the flywheel going a little bit, right? Because you don't have the capital to invest in real marketing right at that point. So you've got to figure that out. And that's actually one of the tests of, are you going to be a successful founder or entrepreneur? Like, can you figure out that way to ignite that initial ignition point, right, of a company? So do they have that scrappy spark? And it's different for depending on the business, the product that you have. But we look for that scrappiness in that go-to-market ability that they should have.
Just hustling and getting out there and nailing that soon. And I don't know, back to the data piece that you're saying,
right?
Like those cycles.
That's part of it. Yeah, testing a bunch of different strategies, seeing what works. Right. We're kind of going into the golden era of early stage venture, and being able to start companies because again the barriers are being lowered, and it's more capital efficient than ever to start a company. What I think is going to be pretty disruptive later on in kind of the growth stage of businesses is the cost of capital is going to go way down, right? And that's because these companies, again, are able to go much further on a lot less. They're still going to raise growth rounds, but I think they're going to happen at these super large valuations, and you're already starting to see that. And so if you're a growth stage investor, like, that's not necessarily the best thing ever, right? Because you're going to have to be paying up quite dramatically for these new unicorns that are being minted because they're growing so fast. And it's great for founders, right? Because they have even more choice of who they work with. And again, it's going to be less dilutive for them as well. So there's this whole restructuring, reworking of the capital stack that's going on as an effect, as an impact of AI and what it's doing for early stage founders. So it's actually creating even more leverage, kind of this snowball effect where not only are these companies more capital efficient, getting to higher ARRs faster than ever before, they're also able to raise capital at premium valuations, and it's backed up by the revenue growth. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's an interesting time. It's good to be early stage, early stage investor, and but growth stage is tough right now if I'm on the investor side, right? So
that's interesting. So if we had to break this down in the most simple terms for maybe someone who isn't as familiar with just how capital markets work,
it's pretty simple. Growth stage investors are looking, for almost the same, best deals, and these companies are now growing in ARR faster than ever before, right? You're talking about, before where you had a SaaS company that was growing, the usual triple, double in terms of SaaS revenue. Now that's not good enough. They're going into these funds and they're like, oh, you're not growing 10x year on year. I don't know about this, right? Which makes it tougher for some founders, right, that are not necessarily in that wave, right? So they have to, go further on the capital that they have. But the ones that, have hit that type of product market fit, again, for them, the cost of capital is really low because all the growth stage investors know that they have to get into that one business. There's not that many of those companies out there, so they're all competing for the same thing. And, that's why you're seeing the cost of capital go down. I think it'll go down even more because these companies don't need a lot of money. If you're actually looking at some of these rounds that are happening for the Gen AI companies, the native AI companies, they're big, but they're not SoftBank level $400 million, $500 million big. They're 50 million, 100 million. That's because their headcount isn't that huge, right? Because they've been able to do things very efficiently, utilizing all these tools. So
that's interesting. So is the implication of this maybe at the seed stage is that there is going to be more money for seed for seed investing?
It's more like if you break out, it'll be much easier, more advantageous for you to raise growth capital. At the seed stage, there's really kind of a bifurcation that's going on. There's two different classes of companies. There's your native AI companies, which it's actually pretty hard to raise the future, call it the Series A round, because you have to show that type of explosive growth. It's not enough to say I'm growing 2 to 3x. Like they're expecting 5 to 10x growth now, and I've seen this. Like it's wild. And it's actually almost better if you're completely non-AI, right? Because you're still held to the prior standard, right? Like if you're, a company that's doing, some sort of consumer online internet service or something like that, or maybe an old school SaaS, vertical SaaS product, you're still kind of held to the triple, double, double. But if you're sort of in between, you're kind of AI, kind of not, like you're going to be held to that 10x type standard. And so you've got to, if I'm an early stage founder, you've got to figure out which lane am I in. If you're like, I'm an AI company, okay, that's cool, that's great, but the bar is higher. Actually, it's not like I'm AI, people are throwing checks at you. You have to show the results. And again, you're seeing companies like Lovable and Cursor that are growing faster than any company in history, and so that resets investor expectations of what they need to see to get excited, right? So
that's so interesting. The bar is higher if you're going to play in that game.
Yeah, you're playing in that game, or don't play in that game and play in the kind of the old school game, which I think those companies are still being judged kind of quote unquote normally, right, as they were in the past, right? So the problem is kind of in the middle there, right? Some companies are like, oh, I'm doing this, but let me sprinkle some AI on this, or do a wrapper, and then you're kind of pitching yourself as an AI company, but you're not growing as fast as an AI company. That's where you might get into some trouble.
That's really, man, that's so interesting. Well, that I love that. I was just thinking about defensibility because I have an interesting case study with myself for just podcasting software.
Yeah.
I recently canceled a podcasting platform that was basically using GPT to help me get a lot of descriptions, just basic stuff.
Right.
And I went, because I'm already using GPT,
Okay.
of course, and I paid to do that as well.
Uh-huh.
But it made me think about defensibility, which
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how you look at defensibility, because I'm like, gosh, it's really easy to just send the transcript of a podcast into GPT and say, give me the summaries,
Right.
and it's really accurate.
Yeah.
Whereas like the sit on top wrapper actually caused distractions from my experience.
Right.
So I'm just
That's a great point. Yeah. It's one of when we look at AI companies, that's the key thing that we look for. Like the last thing you want is invest in something, and then 2 weeks later it's completely obsolete because OpenAI came out with the next thing, right? Or Anthropic, and that happened a lot, especially in the kind of last 2 years. Many examples of that. So we really kind of, when it comes to AI specific investing, we kind of look at 4 different pillars of defensibility.
Yeah.
And one of them, we're looking for companies that have some sort of IP or data moat, right? They're actually not an AI, they don't actually create any AI tools themselves, but they leverage that to create AI products, leveraging their own IP. And so as the AI gets better, their product gets better. A good example is MasterClass, actually, right? So they have this whole, library of phenomenal instructors, the best in the world, teaching classes. But now they're going out and they're getting permission from those instructors to create kind of the AI voice clones and eventually video clones as well of their persona, where people can have one-on-one conversations with like Gordon Ramsay, Mark Cuban, etc. Right? And nobody else can do that. And it's only going to get better over time. And they can plug and play whatever LLM or third-party software that ends up, winning or being better at that moment. So that's a perfect example. Love that type of defensibility, and they're only going to get better as the industry gets better. The second area that we kind of look for right now is things that are going to benefit from the explosion of AI on the peripheral sense. So like AI security is a good example. Companies that are helping enterprises figure out how to deploy AI safely, ethically, warding off deep fake kind of issues. And these are more kind of traditional security companies that are leveraging AI models. And we have, an example there in our portfolio, a company called Resemble.ai that does this. But love that because, again, the need for that is only going to, get higher, and their specialty is around security, not necessarily competing in the LLM kind of world, right? And it's just a different play. The next one is you could kind of treat this as a data play, but there's going to be a huge intersection of AI and LLMs meet the physical world that's coming, right? That's a big theme, big thesis of ours. how, like, as you get like humanoid robots and more autonomous vehicles and autonomous machines, the LLM is kind of their brain, but they still need to interface in the real world. So how do they maneuver? How do they get around? They need that physical data context. And so there's going to be a lot of interesting innovation coming out there. We have one company, Niantic, which was the company behind Pokemon Go. They just sold their games business, but they have 30 billion data points around the globe of people interfacing with, the world, that they're leveraging to essentially feed into LLMs, so they have spatial context. And it's fascinating what they're doing, and that's going to be a big part of some of the innovations that are to come. And then lastly, we're looking at companies that are dramatically driving down the cost curve. Now, they are leveraging like the GPTs, as you mentioned. We just invested in a company that literally took every single go-to-market tool in existence, from Salesforce to Gong to SalesLoft to ZoomInfo, 6sense, and put it under one umbrella with an AI agentic interface over it. And the cost of all those tools combined for like a growth stage company is probably like $500,000. This company will do it for like 50K, essentially, right? So it's such a dramatic cost difference, and the functionality will be amplified because they are using agentic architecture. Again, they're leveraging LLMs, but what's defensible is that once they get into an organization, all of that data is ingested into this company around customers, around how they're interfacing with the company's product, that we think that's going to be defensible as well. So that's more like a workflow data play as well. So those four kind of pillars are how we try to figure out defensibility in this AI world. But even then, I'm positive we're going to get some of these wrong, and like one of these LLMs is going to just do one of these things, and like one or two of those pillars will be obsolete as well. I don't know.
You can't predict it.
It's hard to predict. You can just kind of take your best shot, but it is something we think super actively about.
That is so cool. The defensibility, the last one that you mentioned around just bringing on together all the sales tools or whatever tools that are in a specific vertical, and then putting AI on it. Like it's almost like what Microsoft has done with Copilot.
Yeah, right.
And my wife uses that now. You hear complaints about Microsoft products just for obvious big enterprise kind of reasons. But when you hearing people, especially my wife, mentioning the power of Copilot just because it has access to everything.
Yeah.
She's like, this is the best product I've ever had from Microsoft.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah,
and it's the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, every time there's a big platform shift like this, technological shift, there's an opportunity to rebuild kind of the software that's been built in sort of the prior waves, right? Salesforce, kind of the original cloud company in some ways, right? And they ushered in the era of cloud. And that was their opportunity to disrupt, the old school database companies or CRM tool companies. And I think there's another opportunity now with pretty much every software stack imaginable, because sometimes it works when you bolt it on like the way Microsoft has done, and they've been one of the leaders in this. And I think it sounds like they've done a really good job, and I think they have. But a lot of companies struggle with just like, oh yeah, we need to do AI. Let's just bolt it on to our old software. You don't really get the benefit of it, and it doesn't work as well. You kind of have to build it from the ground up with that new architecture. And so I think that's the opportunity, right? Is to relook at all these old categories and see which ones are going to be better if they were built with an agentic architecture from day one, right? So
that is interesting.
Yeah.
It's a challenging time to be one of those like amazing SaaS companies that were created 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. There's just like the new defensibility world for them now is being undermined because of what you're saying.
Exactly.
But it's also just exciting, and that's how things go. And that's what they did to the generation before.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
It's just how it goes.
Some will survive, some won't. But
what's something that people are probably missing in this new world of AI that all the founders are focusing in one area? What do you think they're missing?
Well, I think one of the big kind of opportunities is figuring out what's next with LLMs, right? And you can think of LLMs as our digital or the brains, right, of the AI brain, but these brains need to be able to function in the real world environment, right? So as you think of like the next wave of innovation, and Elon talks a lot about this kind of stuff, right? With the Optimus robot, there's going to be I think undoubtedly I agree with them. A humongous market created of humanoid robots, obviously autonomous vehicles. That's already happening. You need to provide real world physical context to these LLMs, right? And so part of that is data. Some of that is infrastructure type plays. But how do you append physical context, spatial context to LLMs is a huge opportunity. And we have a company called Niantic Spatial that's playing in that world. They used to be Niantic Labs, which was Pokemon Go, and they had 30 billion data points through all their games, and they're leveraging all that to create that data set. And NVIDIA has already stated this is their number one next thing that they're working on as well. They're going to have to partner with lots of different other players because they don't have the core data set themselves. I think the whole Elon X ecosystem is well suited because obviously they have Teslas that are have cameras and a lot of geospatial data coming in through that, so they're already positioning themselves to be one of the key players that are going to converge those two worlds together. So I think that's like a fascinating thing. One of my partners, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, he was one of the co-founders of Keyhole, which was bought by Google and became Google Earth. Which just celebrated their 20th anniversary today, actually.
That's so
which
cool.
is a game-changing, product, right? And so we're seeing a lot of companies that are coming in right now because, of his background, that are coming up with some mind-blowing stuff around this whole concept of LLMs meets, mapping or physical world map and geospatial data. So
Very cool.
I think that's something to keep an eye on. If I'm a founder or an investor, like that is the next big kind of wave in AI.
And you don't typically invest in hardware personally?
Funny enough, I started my career in hardware, helped get a company called Uma off the ground, which is now a public company. So I know hardware, pretty well, and did a lot of different, facets of that business in the early days. We don't do a lot of hardware unless it's like super low cost kind of sensor stuff, because it's so capital intensive, right? We like to do more of the data software plays around that. So when you talk about deep tech, we're not going to go invest in like the satellite, company. Nothing wrong with that. It's just our fund size and our concentration doesn't really, allow for that. But we would look at, kind of the software plays that are around deep tech. Or the data plays that are around it. So no hardware for me.
but yet there's just a new opportunity there. It seems like there's a huge surge in hardware investing just from my peripheral view, and as a side opportunity, there's going to be a lot of software.
Oh yeah, like that hardware for sure. I mean, it's going to be massive market creation happening, but it's not enough to just like here's a robot. The robot needs to know what to do, and where to go. 100%. So just like a Tesla car to be autonomous, there's a lot of data on software and the machine learning and AI that goes into that, right? So
100%.
Who's building that, right?
In
Tesla's case, they're building it, but I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for independent software companies and data companies to play in that world.
That's
cool.
What
We're looking for. Yeah,
I was talking to a partner at Lux Capital. He was here and he was just talking about the biggest challenge around that is just there's not enough. Like the reason that LLMs are so powerful is because we have so much writing data on the internet. We don't have that same in the actual real world. So that's the opportunity that.
We have it. It just hasn't been translated to the LLMs. So think of Google Earth. Like we have, or the Google Earth, they use like historical data, but there's all these satellite companies like Maxar and others and Esri, where they have real time mapping almost on a pretty frequent basis of everything going on the globe, right? So it's there. You got to pull it out though. You got to pull it out and make it accessible. So. And it's not as available. Even in that case, it's still not as granular or as good as what the LLMs are able to eat up online for sure. So that point is super valid. But right now there's like zero of that happening. So there is a lot that we can do with even the data that's available today, and eventually it does get it needs to get more granular. That's why a company like Niantic, like it's pretty creative, right? They're using Pokemon Go and Monster Hunter and all their games where people are literally running around, parks searching for Pokemon. Well, what are they doing? They're collecting geospatial data too. They're kind of mapping that spot, right? And so that's a creative way to get that data as well, right? So there's ways to do it, but clearly there needs to be more innovation.
100%
in that realm.
Yeah. MasterClass founder. What was the most interesting thing that you saw in them?
We invested in 2014. This was 9 months before they even launched. There was a brand, but there was no revenue. They had filmed like one class at that point, very, very early on. So there wasn't any like, hey, here's how much revenue traction that we have. But the founder, David, he had what I was referring to earlier, the scrappy spark element of kind of getting the flywheel going. And I don't think anybody could have gotten this company off the ground other than David, in my opinion, because he had to go out and convince like some of the best names in the world to take a chance on this concept before there was any validation. And these are big names. They're used to people hawking them ideas all the time, and you generally are pretty skeptical about it, right? But David, he has this unbelievable ability to connect with people, and charisma and authenticity, and a genuine love for what he's doing, a passion. He's like very mission driven around democratizing education, and that came through. That came through to people like Serena Williams and James Patterson, Wayne Gretzky, and like unbelievable names. And I remember we had a lunch or a dinner when he was explaining to me the idea, and I'm like, great idea, David, kind of hard to pull off. And he's like, he slips over a piece of paper with all these names. I'm like, oh yeah, nice names. He's like, no, these aren't just names. I already have all of these committed. And my mind was just blown. Like, how did you do that? He had a little bit of seed capital, but to be able to get that done was so hard. And that got the whole MasterClass flywheel going, because once you've got that supply of these amazing names, the next set of names was easier to get. We were able to launch with these big names and start getting the revenue and the credibility and building the brand. But it all started with that initial scrappy spark, that initial crank of the flywheel that allowed it to pick up steam and momentum. And so that was incredible to witness. And, for that particular business, this was the right founder at the right time to get it going.
And that's what you're looking for.
Yeah,
it's within the context of what they're building.
Yeah.
Are they 1, 2, or 3 best person in the world?
Yeah.
To do this, and how do you demonstrate that as fast as possible?
Yeah, exactly.
And for you, the names across the table, you're like,
yeah. Well, he did it. Yeah, he did it. He already proved it out. He had it was a Herculean task to have done that early on, and we have to take a leap of faith for sure that it was going to translate into revenue, but he got the hardest part done, which was getting this super hard to get supply, right? And that was incredible. I mean, there were other things too, like they were very quantitative in how they figured out which classes would actually sell, and the people, the instructors that people wanted to learn from, not just somebody that was famous.
Yeah.
You could be famous, but people don't want to learn from you. You have to be famous and somebody that people actually want to learn from, right? So they did a lot of quantitative surveys and studies early on to figure that out as well. So there was several signals about their ability to be data driven and scrappy, and the ability to kind of get that distribution flywheel going early on.
The MasterClass example is so cool.
Yeah.
Can you take us back to like the first time you met the Thumbtack founders?
Yeah.
And what gave you conviction?
Yeah, very early on in my venture career. I think that was like the second deal that I led at Javelin, and I met them. They were doing a bigger fundraise initially, and they talk about this publicly. They had a lot of no's, a lot of folks that no to them. And I think we were one of the first conversations that they had where they decided to raise a little bit less capital. I think originally they were raising 10, and they said, we're going to raise like, was it 5 or something like that, 4 or 5. And we were one of the first combos when they did that. And they also didn't have any revenue at the time. They had a marketplace that was sort of working, and people were putting in, requests and getting some people to bid on that. So you could see, kind of the early signs of it. But what I mentioned to you earlier, right around kind of that scrappiness, like they were doing really interesting things about generating initial demand. They got really good at SEO. Like they were one of the best companies, even at that stage at the SEO game. And that to us felt like, wow, this company can get to significant scale without having to spend a lot of money on acquisition.
And it was already working.
It was working for generating demand, not translating that into revenue yet, right?
So you were willing to make that.
Yeah,
more.
that was the bet that we had to make. And then the other element was this whole data-driven decision-making thing that I referenced earlier. They had invested in all these internally built dashboards where, a marketplace business like that is super complicated. There's so many different ways to cut the data and figure out what's working, what's not across, this vertical, that vertical. And they had that. They had made that investment. And so when we were asking them all these data-driven questions, they didn't know the answer off the top of their heads, but they knew how to look it up. They knew how to figure it out. And so we were like, these guys are going to optimize their way to a massive, massive business. And so that religion philosophy of iteration and data-driven hypothesis testing was there. Plus the distribution component was there in a way that we hadn't seen in other companies. And so, and then obviously we love the founders. They were the prime definition of hustle and scrappiness. Marco and Jonathan and Sander, I mean, unbelievable. So it actually was a pretty easy decision at that point for us to take the leap of faith that they would figure out the business model side, which they just as they methodically figured out distribution, they figured out the business model by testing through like 20 different ideas and getting to the one that stuck and worked. And man, that business is such a great company. It's such a wonderful experience being a part of that for, I mean, it's been 14 years, right? Since we invested, and
that's so
they
cool.
are, I mean, they're huge.
This has been amazing,
Yeah.
Alex. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. I'm Adam O'Donnell. This is the Founder Initiative. This is more than just a podcast. Reach out to me on LinkedIn with feedback or other founders or VCs that we can interview. This community is about helping founders hit product market fit, get funded, and stay up to date. Boom.